Obesity is frequently viewed through a narrow lens of calorie intake and physical activity, but a deeper, often underestimated factor lies in the human psyche. Emotional states, especially stress, anxiety, depression, and boredom, can have a profound influence on eating behavior. Emotional eating is not simply a matter of weak willpower or indulgence. It is often a coping mechanism, an automatic and deeply ingrained response to negative internal states that provides temporary relief, but ultimately leads to chronic overeating and weight gain. Understanding this psychological relationship with food is crucial for addressing obesity in a more compassionate and effective way. When the body experiences stress, whether from work pressure, family conflict, financial hardship, or even low-level chronic anxiety, it triggers a cascade of hormonal responses. Chief among these is the release of cortisol, a hormone that prepares the body to deal with perceived threats. In short bursts, cortisol can be beneficial. But when stress becomes chronic, cortisol remains elevated, which has several unintended effects. It increases appetite, boosts cravings for calorie-dense foods, and encourages the body to store fat, particularly in the abdominal region. In evolutionary terms, this made sense. Stress once signaled physical danger, and storing energy was protective. But in modern life, the threats are more often psychological, and the availability of comfort food is constant. The result is an environment where the emotional drive to eat is triggered far more frequently than the physical need for fuel. Food offers immediate, predictable emotional rewards. Sugar and fat stimulate the brain's reward system, releasing dopamine and offering a short-lived sense of pleasure or calm. This creates a powerful feedback loop. Feel bad, eat, feel temporarily better, repeat. Over time, the body begins to associate food with emotional regulation rather than physical nourishment. People in this cycle may not recognize hunger cues clearly, or may continue eating long past the point of fullness simply because the act of eating distracts from discomfort or provides a numbing effect. The problem is compounded by the fact that many individuals are unaware that their eating is emotionally driven. They may blame themselves for lack of control, not realizing that their behavior is rooted in chronic emotional strain or unprocessed psychological wounds. Emotional eating doesn't always look extreme. It can be subtle, reaching for snacks while watching TV out of boredom, finishing a meal with dessert out of habit rather than hunger, or grazing throughout the day to soothe anxiety. These behaviors often go unnoticed or are rationalized as harmless, but over months and years, they can lead to a consistent caloric surplus that quietly contributes to weight gain. What makes emotional eating particularly difficult to address is that it cannot be solved by simple dietary restrictions. Telling someone to just eat less or avoid certain foods ignores the real function food serves in their emotional life. It's also important to note that psychological eating patterns are often shaped in childhood. For many people, food was used as a reward, comfort, or distraction from pain long before they had the emotional tools to deal with discomfort in healthier ways. These early associations create neural pathways that are difficult to undo later in life, especially if more adaptive coping mechanisms are never developed. For others, trauma, abuse, or long-term neglect may have made food one of the few reliable sources of control or comfort. In such cases, emotional eating is not irrational. It is a deeply human survival strategy that deserves understanding rather than judgment. The good news is that emotional eating, while complex, is not irreversible. Increasing awareness is the first step. Recognizing when eating is triggered by emotions rather than hunger allows people to begin separating the two. Practices like journaling, mindful eating, and even pausing for a few minutes before eating to ask, "What am I really feeling right now?" can begin to shift unconscious behavior into conscious choice. More importantly, addressing the root emotions through therapy, stress management techniques, social support, or simply slowing down in daily life can reduce the need for food as a stand-in for emotional care. In many cases, it's not about eliminating comfort eating entirely, but reducing its frequency and intensity and replacing it with other forms of emotional nourishment. It's also critical to destigmatize this behavior. Emotional eating is incredibly common, especially in today's high-stress, overstimulated world. It affects people of all sizes, ages, and backgrounds. Framing it as a psychological response rather than a moral failing allows for a more productive and empathetic conversation about obesity and weight management. Emotional eating is not a character flaw, It's a signal that a person's internal needs are not being met in other, healthier ways. Ultimately, tackling obesity requires far more than controlling what's on the plate. It requires addressing why a person turns to food in moments of distress, what emotional gaps food is filling, and what patterns have been built into the brain over years of coping. Psychological well-being and emotional literacy must be treated as foundational elements of health, not side issues. Until we understand and address the inner landscape of eating, no amount of diet advice will resolve the true drivers of chronic overeating.